Hello everyone, this is the second episode of the DataSpot podcast and we are discussing inflation. In the last episode, we touched upon the different measures of inflation. We understood that the answer to the question, what is the current level of inflation, is it depends on what you are trying to measure and from whose perspective. We talked about consumer price index, CPI, wholesale price index, WPI, GDP deflator, and household inflation expectations. We hope that was useful for you. In this episode, we are going to discuss how any inflation or price index, and specifically the consumer price index of India, is actually calculated. And no, we are not going to throw complicated math or jargon at you. We will be discussing this at a conceptual or procedural level. So, the next time you see or hear the inflation number, you understand how that number has been arrived at. And as we told you earlier, it is not as easy as going to the market and noting the prices of onions and potatoes. It is more complex than that. But allow us to simplify the process for you. So let's get started. Let us suppose you want to calculate inflation for your family. How will you do that? There are many families which keep a detailed tab of their monthly income and expenditure. They compare total expense every month and see whether they have been spending more or less. But the monthly change of your spending is not inflation. This is because every month we spend on different things. Sometimes some basic items like food grains, rent, petrol, etc., as well as some one time purchases such as holiday or an iPad. Therefore, we must be careful while calculating inflation. Inflation is change in prices and not change in expenditure. We cannot compare spending on apples in one month to spending on oranges in another to calculate inflation. For calculating inflation, we have to compare price change of a common set of products, technically known as comparable basket of goods and services. So, how would you go about calculating inflation for your family in, let's say, August 2022? First thing you need to do is to have a common basket of goods and services. If you have taken a vacation in August last year and not taken one this year, the expenditure on the vacation will need to be excluded. If in this August you bought a mobile phone and did not buy one in August last year, the expenditure on mobile phone will need to be excluded too. So you did all these adjustments and now you have got a common set of goods and services that you consumed both in August last year as well as this year. The next thing to do is to ensure that we take into account same units of consumption in both periods. If for example you went to a salon to get a facial 2 times in August last year and 3 times in August this year, the higher expenditure on salon in August this year is not inflation. So once you have adjusted for quantity of consumption as well, then the change in expenditure is a rough estimate of inflation your family faced in August. Now, a small digression here. The inflation measure we just calculated is what is called as the year on year inflation, where we compared prices in August 2022 to August 2021. This is how inflation is reported in India. Developed countries generally report month on month change in prices or inflation. So prices in August are compared to July. But because prices are seasonal, the data requires a statistical adjustment for seasonality. So the statistical agencies in say the USA report a seasonally adjusted inflation data in addition to the non-seasonally adjusted data. The month on month measure of inflation, or the one developed countries usually follow, shows more recent changes in prices and is thus more relevant. But such prices also tend to be volatile and also subject to assumptions used in seasonal adjustment algorithm. So there are pros and cons of using this measure. Okay, enough of the digression. Back to calculating inflation. So you have calculated the inflation for your family by considering the same basket of goods and services and the same units of consumption. Now imagine this process for the entire country. Our statistical body, National Statistical Organization, the NSO, sums up inflation faced by all households in India by basically following the same process that you did just now. But this is where it gets even more complicated. Let us see how that is done at the national level, and for understanding that, we are turning to our resident economist Anisha.
Thanks, Swapnil. Hey guys, this is Anisha. Like Swapnil mentioned, the first step in estimating inflation is to create a uniform basket of goods and services. The NSO does this by conducting a pan India consumption survey. So, this establishes the average consumption pattern in the country in a given year. This is the basket of goods and services for which the prices are collected every month and the inflation data are published. Each item is given its weight basis, its share in the total consumption. So, for example, apples will have a certain weight, trousers will have a certain weight, as well as school fees and so on. The current weightages are based on 68th round of National Sample Survey of Consumption Expenditure. The survey was done between July 2011 and June 2012. Since this survey was done around 2012, the CPI uses 2012 as a base year. So when you see 172.6 as a CPI index for June 2022, what it means is that the average prices for a typical Indian households were 72.6% higher in June this year compared with the prices in the year 2012. There are more than 300 individual items of goods and services in our current CPI basket. For each of these items, the NSO collects prices every month. It field staff cover 1114 urban markets from 310 towns and cities and 1181 rural markets every month. An interesting trivia is that the Department of the Post conducts the price surveys in rural areas while in the urban areas it is done by National Statistical Survey Organization or NSSO. Another digression, the calculation methodology we described above is based on the fixed base year because the basket of goods and services used is fixed. So the same 2012 basket is used in 2020-22. There is another way of calculating inflation index and it is called the chain weighted index. It neither has a fixed base year nor a fixed basket of goods and services. It changes every year or even every month. The advantage of chain weighting is that it considers the item that the households are actually consuming currently. In the current CPI basket of India, which uses 2012 as the base year, there is an item called VCR which has pretty much become obsolete. Similarly, due to the pandemic, face masks and sanitizers have become essential items, but India's CPI would fail to capture such changes. Many advanced countries, on the other hand, which follows this method, have included masks and sanitizers in their CPIs and might have removed VCR a long time ago. This makes their CPI more realistic. But this is a costly method and India does not follow it yet. The reason it is costly is because a detailed household consumption survey needs to be undertaken every quarter or every year. This is not feasible in a country like India. Also, there is another problem with this method. Say, for example, if air travel becomes expensive, there is a high possibility that people might travel by railways instead. Isn't that right? What will happen in this method is that weightage of air travel will become less while the railways will increase since this method focuses mainly on the current trend. This creates a downward bias because people substitute for other products if price of something increases. So, the chain weighted index has its advantages as well as its disadvantages. Okay, now let's get back to our main topic. How does the NSA actually compile the prices it has obtained? For that, we will go back to Swapnil.
Thank you, Anisha. NSO collects prices from different markets, processes the data, and releases it within 2 weeks after the month ends. Thus, the data for, say, January is released on 12th of February, subject to holidays. The entire process is automated once the field staff enters the data in a portal. Even flagging outliers is automated. An interesting fact, the NSO releases the inflation data in India with the same lag as the statistical agency in the USA reports it. Amazing, isn't it? What makes the NSO's job even more amazing is that the job for their field staff is not as simple as just going to the markets they have been assigned and collect the price of an orange or apple or fish or house rent. This is because prices vary depending on the variety and quantity and market. Apples come in different variety. Their price varies depending on whether you are purchasing a single apple or a kilo of apple or 10 kilos of them. Plus, the price will vary according to the locality. So, for each of the items that is included in the CPI basket, a granular specification sheet is created. It includes things like the variety or grade of the product, quantity for which prices are to be collected, the brand if applicable, etc. This ensures that the price quotation collected is comparable across periods and places. So, for apples, the specification sheet will be something like apples grade A, price of a kilo when bought in pack of 1 kilo from a certain store in a certain market of a certain city. But what if price for a particular item or variant is no longer available in a certain market? What if, for example, in Mumbai, people stop consuming white bread and shift to brown bread? For this, it is back to our resident economist Anisha.
Hi Swapnil, this is very technical and also quite common situation that the NSO faces. Let us take a simple example. Let us say that in Mumbai, under the heading bread, the price of the white bread was being collected. Now, white bread is itself a very broad item. In reality, the price would be collected for white bread of a certain brand and certain weight from a certain locality. But let us simplify and say white bread in general. So, till say December 2022, white bread price was available, and in January 2023, suddenly white bread disappeared from the market. Only brown bread is available now in Mumbai. What does the NSO do in this case? Now, because the white bread and brown bread are broadly similar, it is quite likely that the price of brown bread for December 2022 is also available. In such a case, what is done is that the prices of brown bread for December 2022 and January 2023 are collected, and this price ratio is bolted onto the price index of white bread which is available till December 2022. Thus, from January 2023, the price change of item bread in Mumbai will be brown bread, and prior to that will be white bread. But what happens if the price for the previous month is also not available? This might happen in the case of consumer electronics, for example, where a new model of, say, a mobile is introduced and the old model becomes unavailable. In this case, the price for the previous month is considered the same as the current month to create the index. And thus, for the first month, the price change will be 0 or the ratio will be 1. Like the red example above, the mobile phone index will thus have the price of the old mobile phone till say December 2022. For January 2023, the price considered will be of new mobile phone, and because we do not have the price for the previous month, the assumption will be that there is no change in price. And from February 2023, the change in the new mobile phone prices will get incorporated. There is another related issue, that is of seasonal products. Say something like mango, which is not available throughout the year. In January, for example, mango is not available anywhere in the country, but it is not discontinued as a product. Come April, and mango prices will be available. So, what does the NSO do in this case? In case of seasonal items, mostly fruits, it just ignores the items when they are not available. In case of mango, Mango has a weight of 11% in the fruit basket of the CPI. Now, during the months in which the price of mango is not available, mango as a category is not considered in the calculation of inflation. The overall weight of fruits in the CPI basket remains unchanged, but the weight of mango is distributed on a pro rata basis among the other fruits which prices are available. Effectively, the weight of other fruits is higher during those months when the price of mango is not available. I hope that this made sense for all of you. Now, back to Swapnil for some more information.
Wow. Thanks, Anisha. That is a lot of work the folks at NSO do every single month. The amount of field work and then data processing that happens every month is just mind blowing. One last item that I want to discuss is housing. An important component of housing inflation is rent. And unlike other goods and services, the data on house rent is collected only twice a year. This is because rents do not change every month. There are around 13,000 houses the NSO collects the data for, and the rent data for each house is collected twice a year with a gap of 6 months. And furthermore, housing inflation is calculated only for urban areas, since in rural areas it is very rare for people to live in a rented house. That is a lot of things we have covered in this episode. I hope you got an overview of how the CPI data is collected, processed, and then presented by the NSO. We covered different aspects like from how many places the data is gathered, what type of prices get included, what happens if prices of some products are not available in a particular place or period, how the rent data is collected, so on and so forth. So the next time you read about the inflation data, don't be cynical about it. Yes, there are limitations to the data as we have discussed, but it is a mammoth exercise that the officials of NSO do every month and then report the data within less than 2 weeks of the month having ended. At the same time, there is a chance that your family might have faced inflation of more than 10% while the others only 2%. But the inflation figure you see on the TV was 7%. Remember, these are all averages. So this includes vegetarian and non-vegetarian households, rich as well as poor families. This will also include the salaried and self-employed ones, every type of household. So it will never be same for everyone. If you are a business person, your perception and experience will be different from that of a student. So one needs to be mindful of the inflation number he or she is looking at. We will discuss the implications of this averaging in the next episode. See you soon.
And that concludes this episode. I hope you liked it. Your hosts today were Swapnil and Anisha. The transcript of this episode and episode links are available on our website indiadatahub.com. If you did like this episode, please subscribe and share this with others who you think might be interested. If you have any feedback or suggestions as to what topics we should cover, do drop us a line at podcast@indiadatahub.com. See you next week. This is Ashutosh, the co-founder of India Data Hub, signing out.